Let's talk about waste yarn and working with circular knitting machines. So first of all, we need to define what waste yarn is. So waste yarn is a contrasting color that you use to cast on or off of your machine, typically in the same weight as your working yarn. So you'll see on this sample right here, we have this contrasting color. This will actually be removed once we pick up these loops on the inside and finish it off. This side, however, did not have waste yarn on it, and you'll see that it's curly and doesn't quite lay flat. Now, there are uses for each. For example, if you were going to make just a standard beanie, this type without waste yarn would be sufficient because you would just pull on the end and you can cinch it all together. However, if you are working on more of like a wearable item or something where you need a nice clean edge, for example, the edge of this project right here, we need to use waste yarn. If not, we will get that wiggly wobbly edge right here and it won't look as nice as it does with the waste yarn. So with that said, let me show you how to cast on and cast off using waste yarn. To cast on with your waste yarn, it's going to be the same method to begin with that you would on your standard cast on. So you're going to take your waste yarn here, you're going to place it under that first loop just to hold it in place, and then you're going to go behind, in front, behind, in front, and you're going to do this all the way around with that first round. Again, making sure you do go behind and in front, alternating all the way around. When you get back to that pin, then you're going to place it in your yarn guide and you're going to go around about 4 to 10 times, whatever your personal preference is. I typically do about 4 rows of waste yarn to cast on, and then I use what's called a ripcord, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So let's go ahead. We've gone around our first round and we'll go 3 more rows. Now you can go as many rows as you feel is necessary, but casting on is going to be just a little bit different because it does not tend to unravel the same way casting off does. But because of that, it does make it a little bit more challenging to take off the waste yarn when you're ready to remove it. And this is where the ripcord comes into play. This is optional. You don't have to use this method, but I will tell you if I'm going to be using waste yarn, I use this ripcord method at 100% of the time. So for the ripcord method, we are going to take this first waste yarn and we're going to put it in the center. And then we're going to take another contrasting color. So this color is going to be contrasting between your waste yarn and your working yarn. It does need to be long enough just to go around one time. So we're just going to be knitting 1 row with our ripcord. So we're going to place that in the yarn guide, hold on to our 2 tails, and then knit 1 row. That's how you cast on with waste yarn. Then you'll add your working yarn as you typically would, and then work as many rows as necessary for your project. When you're ready to cast off with waste yarn, again, you're going to cut your working yarn and place that right into the center, and then take your waste yarn, place that in the yarn guide, and then you're just going to knit around. And for the cast off end, I do recommend, especially when you're first starting out, to do at least 5 rows because once you cast off of your machine, even with the waste yarn, it is going to easily come unraveled. So the more rows, the better when you're just starting. Now, one of the really fun things I love about working with waste yarn is instead of having to take your darning needle and pick up all of the live loops as you go around, once you get back to the number of rows that you want, you can take that yarn tail, place it in the center, and then you're just going to knit all the way off. So you'll just continue cranking now that it's no longer under the yarn guide, and your work will just fall right off of your machine. If it gets stuck on a pin, that does tend to happen, just manipulate it and pull it right off. So here is our sample that we just pulled off of the machine using waste yarn to cast on and cast off. And just to show you, as I mentioned, here's the cast off end. And if I barely touch this waste yarn up here, it's going to start to unravel. And that's why it's really important that you have as many rows as necessary so that you can actually pick up your loop before your waste yarn does come unraveled. And then to finish this side, side here and remove your waste yarn, you would just do a standard method. You can pick up this working yarn right here with your darning needle or with your crochet hook, and then you're going to go around your project and pick up every single one of your loops. For example, if we were going to do a slip stitch, we would just fold this in half and then we would pick up a loop on this side, We would come over here, pick up the loop on this side, and we would make sure that we're picking up all of the live loops before we remove the waste yarn. And if you have questions on different methods for finishing the ends of a project, I do have a number of videos in my playlist called Knitting Machine. So now that we've picked up all of the live loops on our cast off end, now all you have to do is remove the waste yarn. It's easiest if you find the long tail or the tail that you cast off with, and then you're just going to pull it and you'll see it'll totally unravel here. And then this is what your project will look like with that slip stitch method. Instead of having the curly ends or having it uneven, we have a nice, beautiful, clean finish. So now let me show you the magic of the ripcord. So now let's say we're ready to do the same thing on this end. We'll just do another slip stitch. So picking up those loops, which is why contrasting yarn is so important. It's very easy to see that all of the yellow loops are the ones that we need to pick up right now. So now we have picked up all those loops. We've done a slip stitch finish. And now, as I mentioned, with the bottom waste yarn, if you would try to unravel this, it's not going to unravel. It's just kind of knotted in place. You can go through and just pick up as you find the loop here. You can do this and just find those loops and just manually go through and pull it out, but it takes a little bit more time. So instead, we're just going to take our ripcord and we're going to tug on it. We're going to pull one side at a time. I typically do the top and then the bottom. So we pull that side out and then we're going to pull this side out. Okay, and now ready for it? Ready for it? And then your waste yarn just comes right off because it was connected to the ripcord and not to your work. And that is why we use waste yarn in a nutshell: how to cast on, cast off, and then also why we might use a ripcord. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you on the next video.